Hey everyone, my guest today is Julianna Margulies. She is an award-winning actress and she has appeared on stage in Festen, 10 Unknowns, The Vagina Monologues, Intrigue with Faye, The Substance of Fire, Fefu and Her Friends. On TV, you know her from The Morning Show, Billions, The Hot Zone, Dietland, The Good Wife, The Sopranos, The Grid, The Mists of Avalon, and ER. Some of her many her film credits include the soon-to-be-released Millers in Marriage, Three Christ, The Upside, Stand Up Guy, City Island, Snakes on a Plane, the Darwin Awards, Slingshot, Ghost Ship, Evelyn, The Man from Elysian Fields, and so many more. She's the author of a gorgeous memoir called Sunshine Girl: An Unexpected Life. And today, my friends, she is starring on Broadway in a glorious play written by Delia Ephron called Left on 10th. I am so thrilled and honored to have Juliana on the podcast today. Welcome, welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. We're doing a lot of shows a week, 8 shows a week. And so it's such an interesting process because as tired as you are, the play is so beautiful that I feel like I speak for everyone in the play. We can't wait. I wake up in the morning and I can't wait to get back on stage to do it. It's
That's
such a
such
gorgeous story and it's all true. So as tired as I am, I'm also strangely, I mean, you and I were just talking before the recording started about, so it's December 23rd today. So tomorrow we get Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off, and then we do two shows the day after Christmas and it's nonstop. And we do a show tonight on Monday, which is usually our day off. But my family left for vacation because I didn't think it was fair that they be punished because I'm going to be in New York City on during the holidays, and it's such a vacation for me. I mean, to wake up this morning, I went to bed. I'm embarrassed to say, I went to bed at 9 o'clock last night, and I got up at 5 this morning and got so much done. And so I feel great. I mean, I feel really good.
that is the best. 9 o'clock, snugly in
Yeah.
your bed.
And
Incredible. Phones
yeah, well,
off.
we have a Sunday matinee at 3, and it was our 100th performance.
Wow.
So which I thought was, a great milestone. So the four cast members went out. I took everyone out to Joe Allen's, which is the New York theater restaurant. Um, and we had a glorious dinner at 5:30, so I was home by 7:30.
I love that. There's nothing about that that I don't like. I
Yeah,
feel
it's like the perfect day.
to get to do a matinee with Peter Gallagher and your glorious cast, written by truly one of the most iconic, gifted writers of a generation. Um, let's talk about Left on 10th, and then we're going to go backwards a little bit because I really do, people feel such ownership of you. There's the show that you were on that's their favorite.
Right.
So, if I talked about ER the entire time, many listeners would be happy if we did The Good Wife the whole time. But I want to talk about this beautiful play. And then I'd love to go back a little bit because I know from your memoir that calm might not have been the best way to describe your childhood.
Correct.
And acting in some ways might not be considered a calm career to go into, but I want to figure out like the building blocks and how it all came together for you in this magnificent, glorious, inspirational career. But I saw Left on 10th, and I have rarely seen an actress and a part merge in like this perfect fusion of where your talent lies, where Delia's talents lie, and it's an explosion of gifts for the audience. So if
So
you can
much.
talk, not everyone listening will have gotten to see the play. And so if you could talk a little bit, briefly, I'm sure you're schooled at it at this point, like sort of the elevator pitch of what the play is about, and then what made you decide, because it's really scary and hard to do a play.
It
And you
is.
don't have to if you don't want to. You chose this. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And thank you for your lovely introduction. So Left on 10th is Delia Ephron's memoir, the play is based on Delia Ephron's memoir of the same title, Left on 10th. And Delia had the title, there's many meanings to the title because she lives on 10th Street and her sister Nora died in 2012 of myelodysplastic syndrome. It's bone marrow cancer, basically leukemia. And 3 years later, her husband of 33 years, who she had been with for 38 years, left her on 10th. He died of prostate cancer. And it's the story, you meet her right 6 months after Jerry Cass, her husband, who was an incredible screenwriter, died, when she is having, in typical Ephron form, having a meltdown over disconnecting her husband's landline. While doing so, Verizon crashed her internet and she could not get a human being on the phone. It was always a prompt. And so the play starts out with this constant recording of Verizon saying, we can call you back between 19 and 26 minutes. It's a universal, I can feel it. I go out backstage when they say 5 minutes before places, I go out because I also tap dance in this play, as you saw, because Delia and Jerry tap dance together. So I go backstage and practice my steps just every night. It doesn't matter how many times I've done it. I'll always do it. And I do my vocal warm-ups and I listen to the audience listening to this constant recording while they're getting their seats of Verizon. And you can feel like some people are screaming, some people are laughing. And you can just, what kind of a show it's going to be by the reaction of the audience. So it goes through this incredible journey of what happened to Delia. When Nora got sick, Delia was a match for her to have a bone marrow transplant. But when they tested Delia's blood, it turned out that she potentially could have leukemia. So she couldn't be a match for her sister, which was heartbreaking because she watched her sister die a very painful, long death. And then Jerry died, and she still had this looming, it's going to happen to me, because, even though it had been 8 years since Jerry died, that her blood counts were always fine. She became incredibly close with her oncologist, Dr. Gail Robos, who plays a prominent part in this role. And it is incredible when we go out the stage door and all the people are standing there, and we always take time to sign autographs and take pictures. How many of Dr. Robos's patients are on that line? It's been such a beautiful journey because it's a story of hope. As much as it's funny and also incredibly sad and gut-wrenching, it is a story of hope. And the hope begins to take a physical form in the name of Peter Rudder, who is a man that, unbeknownst to Delia, she doesn't remember a thing, Nora had fixed her up with when she was 18 years old on a date. And Peter Rudder emails her. She writes an op-ed in the New York Times called Love and Hate on Hold with Verizon. And it pretty much goes viral because everybody has had this experience, and especially people who are trying to disconnect a loved one's phone who has passed. I have gotten so many letters from people saying, oh my God, I saw your play and I can't believe this is what I went through when my wife died, when my husband died, when whoever. It's never an easy task to disconnect someone's phone. So Peter Rudder, who writes to her through her website, once she writes this op-ed, of course, Verizon shows up at her doorstep and fixes everything perfectly. There's a great line in the show where she says, I guess the only way to get Verizon's attention is put something in the New York Times. And every night that line gets such a laugh. You sort of hear people thinking, oh, I'm going to start publishing every time I have a problem with Verizon.
Exactly. Or with anything.
Or with anything.
Yeah.
So anyway, she ends up, so Peter Rudder emails her and says, I had the same problem with my late wife's phone, and actually we dated. And they fall in love over email, which is just bizarre because Delia's biggest hit film was You've Got Mail. And it's about two people, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, falling in love over email.
It's unbelievable. It's like manifested, right? Like you can't make this shit
You
up.
can't make this shit up. And I mean, I still marvel at it every night when I'm saying these lines and then emailing with Peter. The emails that we recite to each other are Delia didn't write them. They're the actual emails that Delia and Peter wrote to each other. So,
Can we talk for a minute, speaking of Peter, because I just had the dreamy Peter Gallagher on
oh,
the play, who plays your co-star.
yes,
Um, I mean, the thing that's so beautiful and real about this play is just when the most magical, unexpected thing happens in your life, which is another chance at love, real life happens too, and that is sickness. And the way in which the marriage vow in sickness and in health, the idea that like these two people who just met and are about to have this second chapter and chance with love, and then disaster strikes. And I don't want to give too much away because I want people to read the book or come see this beautiful play. But it's such a balance of like fantasy and reality and how they constantly crash in our lives just when we least expect it. And the way this couple at the center of your play, especially Peter Rudder in real life, is played by Peter Gallagher, love each other is an incredible thing to behold as an audience member. And just to know that's happening in the world that I live in while all this stuff is going on, there's also two people who can love in the way they love. It's a really remarkable story, but I have to like shine a light on, you and Peter Gallagher are not the same age, and yet there is this absolute truth to the chemistry that you guys bring to this play. And I just want to talk a little bit about the process of rehearsing it. I don't know if you knew each other beforehand and had a shorthand already, but it's so palpable and thrilling to watch you guys fall in love, truly.
I mean, the two of us say every day, thank God we like each other.
Yeah.
I love each other at this point. So we knew each other just, sort of on the outskirts of social gatherings, like
Mm,
friends in common. We would occasionally, when you're a New York actor and, we would occasionally see each other at galas or maybe do a staged reading of someone's play. But I didn't know him. I knew his work.
yeah.
And I had always, he was on The Good Wife and they didn't write any scenes for he and I. So I was furious when I found that out. I was like, wait, we got Peter Gallagher and I have no scenes with him. No,
Sky Masterson is coming on the show.
I
What?
know. And
Yeah.
that was the other thing was I had seen him in that production of Guys and Dolls when I was in college and could only afford standing room only. And I remember, I don't know if I was 20, 19, 20. And I saw him and I said, who is that?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he was electrifying.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
just,
to look like that, to sing like that, and to handle comedy like that, like the
yes.
trifecta in that being, like you were like, what?
I think a lot of people, and I say this to Peter all the time. I'm like, you're you're threatening to men because a man who can act and sing like you should be a character actor, but you're a leading man because you're so gorgeous. And I've seen men, they get weird around him sometimes, especially men his age in our profession. I've seen it
Interesting.
firsthand.
Yeah.
I'm always like, what? Because he is truly a salt of the earth, kind, loving human being. And that is who Peter Rudder, this part wouldn't work without someone who was like that. Because if you meet Peter Rudder in real life, and I am lucky enough that I live down the block from them, and they come to the show twice a week, and they were in rehearsals every day. I mean,
Oh, wow.
even tech week, which is brutal. It's like
Yes.
stand there, no, a little more to your left. I mean, it's marking the stage for lighting and sound. It's has nothing to do with the actual performance, but they were there canoodling in the theater. And Peter Rudder, I think a lot has to do with the fact that he is a Jungian psychoanalyst, but also that he experienced the death of his mother at the age of 7, and he was there and saw her get hit by a car. And he says it in the play. he said, in a magical thinking way, the worst that could happen to me happened when I was 7. So nothing worse could happen. And what a remarkable way to look at life, and that it's like what Peter Gallagher always says to me, his mom used to say, where there's life, there's hope. And I love that because it's not over till it's over. And I truly believe, Peter, it's so straight. We have so many Peters in this play. Peter Francis James plays all the other parts. Peter Gallagher plays Peter Rudder. But Peter Gallagher as Peter Rudder says in the play, he talks about totality. I want to say that I have lived in totality. It's a term borrowed from the sky, totality. It's when it's an actual solar eclipse, not a partial, an actual one. And there's a beautiful poem. It was my dad's favorite poem that Mary Oliver wrote called When Death Comes. I want to say I was the bride, excuse me, living life to its fullest. I'm horribly paraphrasing, except I want to say I was the bride. And I remember reading, he sent me that poem, and I thought, this was way before I'd even met Delia or Peter, or my father died in 2014. So it was the last poem he actually sent me, which was amazing because we didn't know he was going to die. But he, I want to say I was the bride in life, not the bridesmaid. I lived fully. And that's what Peter Rudder is saying. And I say to Delia all the time, because Delia and I are quite close, and there's some really strange similarities that we keep finding over and over again in the strangest ways. But I do believe that without Peter Rudder in her life, I don't think she survives it. He saw her through. He got her through. He never left her side for 100 days in the hospital.
It's incredible.
Happened to be right next to her that night. And because he's a doctor, when her oxygen levels went down at 2 a.m. and she was going, he turned up the oxygen. It's a remarkable story.
It is, and it really is. People say it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, but it really does. And I feel like, in getting to spend a bunch of time with you in preparation for today, it makes so much sense to me that you would appreciate this piece at the level that you do, because of the ways in which, we learn a bit about Delia's growing up, and it was a very, her parents loomed quite large in her own childhood.
Yes.
They were big personalities with a lot of needs, and the
And you're
children
alcoholic.
yeah, and the kids
First
had to
thing
figure out how to fit into their lives. And in knowing a little bit about your childhood, you were the daughter, you and your siblings were the children of a mother who really like lived life on her own terms. And that was not usual for women of that generation. And so you didn't, I imagine, have a lot of friends who were like, yeah, my mom too. Like, it was a very unique situation. And I know I'm jumping way back, but it was just so stirring to me and interesting. Like, I get why this material would speak to you so deeply that you would be willing to send your family off for Christmas without being there, which we secretly know is the greatest thing ever. Can you can you share with my listeners, because your story would make an equally fascinating play, a memoir that would translate really beautifully to film or stage, and I hope that that's happening.
Oh, thank you.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have memories, it's another thing to be able to write in the way that you do. Like, you're such a beautiful writer. I want to just go back. Can you share a little bit of the story? Um, and what made you write that memoir, and sort of how you began? Like, how did you begin the process of synthesizing a life onto the page?
Yeah, I mean, I have such respect for writers. Oh my God. And I've always been such an avid reader, and I love memoirs. I love, I'm an actor, so I like to get into someone else's shoes. And when a memoir is written in a way that you can put those shoes on, it's a journey that you never thought you would go on.
Right.
So it really started, Michael J. Fox and I loved working with him on The Good Wife. And he and I would sit in these big courtroom scenes, which were 14 to 16 hours long because there's so many angles you have to take and the camera movement, whatever. Anyway, and during a break, I was watching an actor not behave well and speak rudely to a crew member. And because I was number one on the call sheet, that always really got my goat. I just was like, are you kidding me? You're going
Right.
to complain about the hours? They've been here so much longer than you, and they get paid nothing compared to what you get paid. And you're being rude. And Michael J. Fox saw me, and it was all an inner monologue.
Right.
And
But he clocked it.
he clocked me, and he was sitting at the opposing counsel table, and he said, "It's shocking, isn't it? People's behavior." And I looked at him and I said, "It's just, I don't even know what to do." And he said, "We should write a book about set etiquette." He said, "Because between your experience and my experience and the probably 50 years between us, on sets, we could write volumes."
Yes.
So it started out, honestly, as me thinking I could pass forward set etiquette to all the actors, the Juilliard, the Yale, the people who go to study acting come in with incredible talent, but no guidance on how to act on a set. Like, it's not just about you. And
How
because
did you learn? Like, if you look back, like, how did you, were there number ones that were actually inspirational, or was it more like, I will never be like that? Like, what was your own education in that way when you think about it?
George Clooney, ER, I watched him. His star rose so quickly on that show. By the third season, he was already a movie star.
Right.
And I had only done a couple of guest spots on TV shows. So ER, I was 25, and I hadn't really done what he had done. He had 14 pilots under his belt
Mm-hmm.
by the time the pilot of ER hit. And we were very close right away. And I watched and learned because I knew I didn't know. And I saw how he treated the crew and guest stars and people coming in. And I loved it because I had been a waitress. And I remembered, when I was a waitress, I was quite good at it because I like taking care of people. So, but I remember Brian McNally. It was this very hot in place called 150 Worcester, and he came up to me screaming because he was under so much pressure. I was always in the VIP section, and I literally had tables, and it was like every celebrity you can imagine, and then the Princess of Greece. And he goes, "You have to make sure." And he's yelling, and I just held his shoulders. I think I was 22. I said, "Brian, they all need to eat, and they'll all get served. Don't worry." And I realized at that moment at 22, like, no one's more important. We all eat, we all sleep, we all go to the bathroom. It's not that difficult.
It's
And
going to be okay.
it's going to be okay. And you treat
Yeah.
every human being equally, regardless. I mean, I do have a saying, I have to say, Alana, if you have cured world peace, hunger, AIDS, and cancer, you have a right to be an asshole. I will give you that, and I won't say a word.
Right.
But unless you have done that,
Right.
you have no right to treat anyone differently at all. And I've always believed that, and I was brought up that way. My father was incredibly considerate and compassionate and empathetic man.
What
And
did your dad do? What was his profession?
my father was in advertising. He was a copywriter. He wrote Plop Plop Fizz Fizz. Oh, what a relief it is.
Stop.
Yeah. But the truth is, he did advertising, and then he was the the creative director of many Wells Rich Green and Doyle Dane Burnback, all these great advertising. He came up in the in the era of Mad Men, that, but he was a vegetarian who didn't drink or smoke. So those 3-hour martini steak lunches were a nightmare for him.
Right,
So
right.
taught me at a very young age, he wouldn't, because he didn't eat meat, he wouldn't write for any meat company. Because he didn't drink alcohol, he wouldn't write for alcohol. Or smoking. He was he wasn't judgmental about any of it. I never once remember going to a restaurant with my father, and we lived everywhere, where he would say, I'm a vegetarian, so only, he would just look and see what he could eat on the menu. He never insinuated himself into anyone else's business.
Mm. Didn't
He just,
impose. He
he
didn't
didn't
impose it.
impose.
Right.
Unlike my mother, who I love dearly, but she imposed herself every second she could get. So I had this incredible yin yang of trying to be strong, but compassionate and empathetic and understanding. And even though we're all not perfect, and there's, all of us, we're human beings, so we're all going to have our failures. But I do believe you judge someone on their best moments.
Mm.
And it's one of the reasons why I can't bear social media. I'm not on any of it. Because everyone sits in judgment of the other and judges these poor girls who haven't even figured out who they are yet, or boys, or whoever. They just their lives get ruined by a mob of people who aren't real. you know
I know. I mean, that's another book.
it's
That's
another
another
book,
book.
but
But
know
why were
yourself.
you, but why, so how did you end up a Mad Men, quote unquote, dad? And at the time, the center of that's New York. And then you were growing up in England and in Europe. How did that transition happen from New York to the other side of the ocean?
Well, when I was a year old, my parents divorced, or they separated, actually. They separated, and my mother, they had moved against my mother's will when they had their first two, my sisters.
Mm.
They were living in New York City on the Upper West Side, and my mother was in heaven because my mother had been a ballerina. And she was on Broadway in the original production of My Fair Lady. And when she met my father, so New York City for her was her happy place. And my father felt very strongly that now they had two kids and the apartment was getting cramped and the children should have a green lawn. And they moved to Spring Valley, New York, to the suburbs. And so my mother was left all day in the suburbs with two little girls. And my father would take the train every day to New York City to his job and then come home exhausted, tired, and not be much fun because
Hmm.
he was tired. And it was sort of this humdrum life that neither of them wanted. And 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 my father got he was working at Wells Rich Green at the time, so I guess this was 1968, and they asked him to open the Paris office. So he moved to Paris, and my mother was stuck in Spring Valley, New York, with three little girls. So I was a year old, you know, and my mother said, "What the I? You're in Paris? I'm not staying here." So we moved to Paris. So she
Okay.
lived on the left bank. My father lived on the right bank. So we could see him on weekends.
Hmm.
And my mother loved it. And then
Right.
2 years later, 2 years after we lived in Paris, he was moved to the London office to open that office. And my mother at that point said, great, we'll go to Sussex, where there was a college she wanted to go to in Sussex, because she had to redefine herself because she was no longer a ballerina after three little girls. And so this college taught what she wanted to learn, and there was a Rudolph Steiner school there, Michael Hall School in Barstow, and London was 30 miles north of Sussex. So so we were in Europe for 5 years, and then we all moved back. And my father lived on 79th Street in the city, and my mother, we moved back into our suburban house that I didn't remember.
Right.
But 5 years after living there and I loved my life. I loved it because I'd see my dad on weekends in New York City. And I had my school and I had my friends and I had gotten rid of my English accent and I felt like I belonged somewhere. And my mother said, I can't live here. And we moved back to England. but my eldest sister at that point was a ballerina at SAB. And so she moved in with my dad.
I
And
see.
my middle sister, Rachel, moved to England with my mom. And it was very chaotic and disorienting, um, and sad, to be honest, because I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. And so my happy time was summer. Every summer I went to camp. This one camp was the constant, Camp McCready, where I rode horses and all my friends were there. And my dad would come on visiting day because he lived in the city and it was in upstate New York. And New York for me was home. Even though I had never actually as a child lived in the city, it was home. It represented happiness to me because I was always happy when I'd see my dad. And
Right.
there was a constant, because I didn't have a constant in my life except when I would see him. And that being said, I always felt the reason my memoir was tricky to write, I have to say, is because as crazy and out there as my mother still is, God bless her soul, she's 89. She's coming to see the play. I figured out how to get her here.
Oh, good.
But she was so loving. She was never verbally abusive or physically abusive. I never suffered at the hands of abuse.
Hmm.
I think some people read my book and said, you were abused. And I was like, no, I wasn't. And they're like, well, that's crazy. What was important to her came first. And I said, yes, but I always had a warm lap to sit on when we finished dinner. Up until I was 14, I sat on my mother's lap. There was tremendous love between us. So I feel very fortunate, but writing the memoir, I asked her for her permission. I said, I need to be truthful because Mom, you were a little out there. And she, God bless her, she said, feel free to write whatever you need to write. Don't hold back.
For a woman who had her own ideas about what her life would look like, and it didn't quite work out that way, how did she respond to your celebrity? What was that like for her?
That's a great question. Well, honestly, I don't really know how she responded to the ER days because I was living in LA and she was teaching, she was a school teacher in New Hampshire. Um, she,
I see.
she certainly loved that I could pay her mortgage,
Uh-huh.
in 26. Um,
Sure.
and I think she was always really proud of me, because I was acting, I wasn't dancing. So there's a
Right.
difference there,
Different
right?
lane.
Different lane. I wasn't in her lane. Um, and she watched every week. I mean, my mother and
Mhm.
father didn't own a television until I got ER. Neither of them had a TV. So,
That's hilarious.
so they had to get a television. I think I bought them televisions. Um, and and after ER, and when I came back to New York, she literally, there wasn't an episode of The Good Wife where I didn't get a message from both my father and my mother.
That's
They
incredible.
I think she's incredibly proud
Yeah.
and grateful that it worked out.
So
Out.
when did you, I mean, Julianne Moore, I've had a lot of people on the show who were Army, military
Yeah,
family, and finding the auditorium where people put on plays, whether it was in, Dusseldorf or Montana, that
right.
was like, oh, I can go and find those people, and they're going to be accepting of this stranger in their midst. Um, you weren't a military kid, but there are similarities in terms of starting over and
Yeah.
over and over again as a young, awkward person. Where did you find, like, how did performing find you and you find it originally?
It was an incredible lightning bolt moment, that where you just, I really thought I was going to be a lawyer. I wanted to follow in my paternal grandmother's footsteps. She was one of the first women lawyers, to
Hmm.
graduate from NYU Law in 1924. And she was a
Wow.
remarkable woman. And I got her green eyes, and people used to say I was very much like her. And I thought, oh God, then I have to be a lawyer. Um, and I got to college and I had a very heavy, I went to liberal arts school and I had a very heavy academic schedule because I wanted to do pre-law. And so I took a theater third. We had thirds in college. So I took a theater third because I thought, because I'd always done theater in school, it came naturally to me. I loved it. And I got into these college classes, and I, on a fluke, auditioned for a play, and I got a part in a senior play. I was a freshman. It was a David Rabe play called In the Boom Boom Room.
Oh my God, of course.
And I was I was a go-go dancer in a cage, but it was one of those things where
That, by the way, that's all I'm going to use to promo this. I was a
oh,
go-go dancer in a cage. Do you know the listings I'm going to get, girl?
yeah, but there was something very,
That's it. Thank you.
you're welcome anytime. There was something very, oh, it was like, I felt like I had been saved. The lights came up for our first performance, and I almost started crying because for the first time in my life, at the age of 18, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Like I had found my tribe. These were my people. And I could be different. And, um, you know, brave. Honestly, the word, I guess when you are a little girl and you have to walk into a new classroom and everyone has a different accent and you're wearing the wrong clothes and you speak differently, you have to be brave to walk into that classroom. And because everyone's judging and looking and, you know, making their opinions. And the same goes for theater. You have to be brave to get up on that stage. There is no take two. You've got to figure it out. And I think that's what I loved so much about it, is that I was like, oh, I know how to do this. You know?
Yes. You
So
had your 10,000 hours, as Malcolm Gladwell says. You were
exactly,
ready. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So, and I think a lot of us actors, we're nomads, you know, when you look at people and especially who gravitate towards the stage. I know a lot of actors who've never done stage.
right.
And no judgment at all. I think they're absolutely petrified, and they have every right to be. It's petrifying, but the beauty of it, like having done our 100th show yesterday, I'm still finding new colors. I'm
Hmm.
still finding new ways to tell Delia's story. And that's remarkable, because when you have good writing, and this is just to go back to Delia for a minute, she's a novelist and a screenwriter. She knows how people speak to one another, but she respects the written word, so much so that the way certain things she's written for me to say, I get so angry at myself if I ever mess up a line.
Ugh, I hate that feeling. I know. I hope you are also equally forgiving of
I,
yourself.
I mean, thank God Peter Gallagher is there, because I'm always like, oh, I messed up that line. He was like, honey, no one noticed. Like I did.
I
Like
know.
it doesn't
I
matter.
know. I know.
But I'm becoming much more forgiving. But it doesn't really happen much anymore because it's so in me.
Mm,
I used to look at my script even, you know, at the 50th performance, but now it's like in my blood. The only time is when, and this is the challenging, wonderful part, and our brilliant director, Susan Stroman, um, you know, we break a fourth wall in the play, and that's rare. So I have to come out right away and talk to the audience. So I can gauge the audience right away. Are they listening? Are they interested? Are they,
is
um,
this a heavy lift or
it's going
not?
to be a heavy lift.
Yeah.
And when it does feel like that in the very beginning, instead of letting it get to me, I look at it as a challenge. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, you're a little quiet. Okay, bring it on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I find a way to just hook them, you know, because that's my job before any of the other actors come out. My job is to make sure, I feel, that the audience is prepared for the rest of the play.
Hmm.
And so, and I mean, I don't take it as seriously as I did in the beginning because I know how to do it now, but that's the beauty of theater. You get to make it better and better and better and better.
Yeah.
And that's really, you know, what I would say to all my friends who have never done theater is I would say, go be brave, because I've learned more. I've been trying to take notes and figure out how to write about some of the experiences that happen on stage for actors. Because like Susan Stroman would say to me, because I'm talking to the audience and someone will be sitting right in the front row. and they're drinking a big gulp and the ice is making noise and it's just me talking to them, you know, and it
Yeah.
is distracting. Or like the other day, a woman was fanning herself. I think she was having a hot flash.
Yeah.
Complete empathy for her.
Right.
But I was like, it was so distracting. And I just hear Susan Stroman in my head say, look up to the balcony. Just look up to the balcony. Because no one else around her, well, maybe the people sitting in the front row were, but no one behind her or up there were seeing it. And I don't want to ruin the play for them. My
Right.
job is to entertain everyone.
Right.
So I don't want to draw focus on what's distracting when no one else is distracted by it. You know,
Right.
that's selfish.
Yes.
I've
I
learned
understand
so
that.
much how to navigate
Yes.
those moments, and it's fascinating. And you have these inner monologues while I'm doing a monologue.
So
I'll
crazy.
be talking about myelodysplastic syndrome and how important your marrow is, while the other side of my brain is going, could you please stop fanning yourself? I can see you. And
Well,
then
I just want to say I'm impressed everyone's awake and moving. That's already a win as far as I'm concerned.
it's been amazing. The audience, I've never, except for the people who are drinking and fanning themselves, everyone's rapt. I've never seen such attention because I'm guilty of being an audience member and dozing off a little bit. I've done it and it's mortifying. It's warm in there, someone's droning on stage, and you just take an expensive nap for a few minutes. It's not good. I'm not proud of it. But the theater is a dark, warm place. So I can understand if someone might fall asleep, they don't have a chance in our play because it never stops moving.
Well, I have to say what's also amazing, it's the kind of play, and this is true. I brought my sister, which really was the perfect, you know,
Yeah.
uh, partner to watch the
Older or
play
younger?
with, my older sister, the Nora to my Delia. But but I literally, it's the kind of play where, so of course I'm holding, my sister's hand on my right, but then like the stranger to my left at one point like took my arm. Like there was something so communal and beautiful about the experience. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a moment where we're not sure how it's going to go,
Yes.
and then I mean we know Delia makes it.
So
She
you
wrote
wrote
the
the
book.
play. It survives.
She survives. But like there's this collective communal sigh of relief when your character gets through this very scary medical drama slash trauma, and to have this stranger, and then she's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, no. And I like grabbed her hand, and not since this play Come From Away that I saw years ago,
Yeah.
where all of us in the audience, we couldn't quite get up afterwards, and we're hugging strangers in the same
Yeah.
way. I do want to say, like, so when you start out, you're waitressing and you're auditioning for plays and starting your career. Um, can you talk a little bit about the absolute, you were, as you said, you were really young when you got ER. It wasn't that many years after your saying like the princess of Greece is going to get her burger, like everybody calm
Yeah.
the fuck down. Um, that seems like it was a very, you had been doing episodic, as we like to call it, and
I,
suddenly,
well, I had been doing a lot of regional theater.
and theater.
Yeah.
But then it's pilot season and you're reading for, we're reading a million things a day. You don't even know which, where your car is parked because it's like the fifth pilot at the time when there was pilot season. Um, I even remember being in a waiting room with you.
What?
Yes, a million years ago with your beautiful curls at the
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Um, I'm trying to remember, like I
New
have
York or LA?
in LA in the back of my mind. Can you help me for a second?
Yes. Yes.
Because did you have a friend named Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my God. Rebecca Baldwin.
Yes, I knew Rebecca Baldwin. You knew Rebecca Baldwin. We
Oh my
had been,
God.
I've been literally, I keep thinking of different Rebeccas who are actresses, and I'm like, no, that's not the Rebecca. It's not Rebecca Hall. Like I could not remember her last
Rebecca
name.
Baldwin.
Rebecca Baldwin. And you and I had met at some thing at her house. Maybe we're trying to start a theater company out there. I don't
He
even
lived in
know.
Larchmont, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Oh
This is
my God.
this is 30, I mean, this is a really long time ago. Um, and I just remember thinking, you had the most beautiful skin I'd ever
Oh,
seen in my life. And I had like Mystic Pizza curls at the time also. Um, and you had them, and I feel like I asked you about products. Like that was I was obsessed. When you have curly hair, that's the
yeah,
conversation. This is
I know.
pre-keratin. This is pre all
Right.
sorts of things that made our life easier. Um, anyway, that is my one memory of
Oh my
you.
God, how funny. And we were at an
Yes,
audition together.
yes. And then the next thing I know, could have been at like, I don't know, Bonnie Zane or something. I don't know, some wonderful casting director. And then ER happened and I was like, wow, that's so exciting.
It's crazy. It was crazy. I mean, it was a beautiful, just a beautiful confluence of events, that
Yeah.
ER episode in my life, because um, I really wanted to I wasn't happy in LA. I really wanted to come home
Mm-hmm.
to New York. And I felt in New York, because I had done theater and off Broadway, and I was sort of the go-to actor for casting directors. I would go and do readings for them, and I had a little bit of, at least just a tinge of respect.
And a community. You're building your community.
Yeah, and in LA, just no one knew me in the
Right.
casting world, and it just felt like, they weren't very the process wasn't kind to actors at all. I felt like we were just sort of discarded. Um, and so I wanted to just make enough money to get my plane ticket home, because I had gone out there to visit a boyfriend, and I just
Oh,
live with him. And then he was like, no, and I was renting a room, and I didn't want to waitress in LA. And I just thought it's easier to go back to New York and bartend or waitress. I know all the restaurants. I can't do this. And I happened to go to this ER audition, and I got the part of Carol Hathaway, which really was just a guest star on the pilot. And so I made plenty of money. I couldn't believe they were paying me $20,000 for a pilot. Of course, I didn't realize that, half of it goes to taxes, and your agent takes, I got this check. I remember being like, $6,000. Wait, what? I didn't realize.
right. Wait, I've just been to Fred Segal celebrating. What do you say?
I bought a dress. What was I thinking?
Yeah.
But I made enough money to get home. And when I got home, I had been planning, because I had done 2 episodes of Homicide: Life on the Street.
All right.
Tom Fontana. Um, I had been working with Ned Beatty on the show, but he wanted to make me a series regular, and pair me as a romantic interest for Kyle. Oh, Juliana, the lead guy on the show.
McLaughlin? Right.
No,
Isn't it McLaughlin?
not Kyle MacLachlan.
No?
One. I'll
Oh,
think.
okay.
Oh,
Listeners,
anyway,
write in and
I came
you'll win
back
a
from
little known
LA.
facts keychain. Yeah.
Yes, little impact. So I came back from LA, and Tom said, we're going to make your series regular on Homicide, and it shot in Baltimore. And I thought, oh my God, I'll have a steady gig, and I'll just take the train back and forth whenever
Yes, that's
um,
huge.
which was huge. And the same day, George Clooney left a message on my answering machine and said, your character tested really well. Don't take another job. I think you're going to live, because my character died in the pilot.
Right.
I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my God, not only do I have 2 possible jobs, which I've never experienced in my life, but now I have to figure out what to do. So I called Tom, and he's still my mentor. He lives down the street from me, and we see each other all the time. And he said, you take the other job, because it's an NBC pilot. And if it hits, it'll be huge. And if it doesn't, you'll always have a place here. And
He did?
that's what he
That's
said.
what he said?
Yeah. So kind.
Nobody says that.
Nobody says that. And look what happened.
Wait, so do you call your agents and go, can you suss this out for me? I just
Yeah.
got a call from an actor.
Right. So I did. Um, and I don't really remember. I didn't have a great relationship with my agency at the time, because I felt like they were well, the New York ones I liked, but the ones that had been my agents in New York had left. And the LA
Wow.
ones who were just not very um, caring about, I felt, about my career, um, were a bit dismissive of me. So I didn't have a great relationship with them. Um, and of course, when the show hit, suddenly they were all on the set of ER. I was like,
Right.
hi. But of course,
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
understand the nature of the business, and I've grown up a lot since then.
Right.
Hold no grudges. Everyone does what they have to do, you know. But I just remember them saying, "We'll look into it." And then John Wells called me and said, "You're not going to be part of the publicity that we're going to be doing for the pilot because we want to surprise the audience that you live." So I wasn't. So yet again, I came in. They had all bonded over their publicity. They went everywhere and they were flying all over the place. And NBC was, you know, and they were having dinners, and I was not a part of that. And then I came to the first day of work, and they were like
Oh
this, you
my
know, like
God.
this little cocoon of friends, and I was sort of again the outsider.
Right.
But
But
George
that changed.
changed immediately with George.
Yeah.
Like, just took me under his wing. He was the first person who said, "Don't take another job." He warned me.
Incredible.
So his kindness will never be forgotten. We're still dear friends, and within, you know, a little bit of time, I was one with the cast. Tony Edwards lives right down the street from me, and he just came to the play. Him and Mayor. I mean, I see them all the time.
It's
So
incredible.
yeah, those are lifelong friends. And George always used to say to us as the cast, because, you know, for Sherry, even though she had come from NYPD Blue,
Right.
so she knew success. But Noah and Eric and me and Tony came from the movie world. So
Right.
he didn't understand TV. Like George kept saying, it is so rare that stars align, meaning the real stars up in the sky,
Right.
like this. This doesn't happen. This is once in a lifetime. And so I really learned to appreciate what it was when it was rather than after the fact.
Right. Well,
Which
for you, it actually turned out to not be once in a lifetime because then you're number one on the
oh
you're and on the Good Wife, and you're paying it forward to the company in that way. And now
right.
you're doing it again in this play. I was thinking, I'm really struck as we finish. I want to let you have your day. You know, this sort of always the bridesmaid, never the bride, that feeling of like, wait, you're all bonding and I'm not allowed to tell anyone yet, or like we're moving to another town and once again, and the idea that you started earlier in this conversation talking about that beautiful Mary Oliver poem that your father sent you, just the idea of like, do you, at this point in your life, in this point in your personal life and your career, and being able to make choices um, that work for you, do you feel like the bride finally?
I do. But you know, I have to say, and I hope your listeners really hear me on this, getting older is the best thing that ever can happen to a person. And I say it because something happens in your 50s when you stop caring about what other people think and you find your own center. And no matter how much success I had from the age of 25 to 50, I was always worried about what other people thought.
Hmm.
And I graduated from that in the most calm. I don't want to say I'll always be nervous when I do a part because that's what happens, but that's an
Right.
exception to it. I feel so grateful for my husband and my son and my family and my life and my friends that it makes me braver when I go out into the world and have to play a character. I do it with absolute abandon because I'm not worried about what someone else thinks. Everyone's going to have an opinion of you. I have opinions of people. I don't tell them because I grew up with a mother who said, you know, and a father who said, even if you have bad feelings about something, you don't have to say it. That's what I don't
Right.
like about social media, right?
Right.
What happened to, you know, humanity? Like, be kind.
Right.
If you have
Right.
nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. That is how I grew up. That's how I'm raising my son. Because toxicity is a very horrific place to live in.
Hmm.
When you get past 50, this incredible, it's like, I feel like saying it's like a beautiful wash of purifying water that just comes over you, or at least for me, where,
Yeah.
where I say, what's important in life? And truly doing this play, when you see what Delia went through, the little stuff doesn't matter. She's
Hmm.
alive.
Yep.
And where there's life, there's hope. And that's all that matters. The rest is gravy. So you can't nitpick at the small stuff. It's not worth it. It's just doesn't make anyone happy, and especially yourself. So the letting go of that, you know, I always say one door closes, a million open. It's true. The second you let go of that insecurity, all these other doors open to allow goodness in. And I feel like that when I get on the subway every day, when I go to work, you know, I had this incredible experience. I just have to say this one thing because it's such a New York moment. Yesterday, so it was December, you know, it's Christmas time in New York, and I love New York at Christmas time. I love the lights, I love the songs, I love the Santa outfits. I just think it's such a joyous time. And we're living in a very dark world right now. So I'm always looking for joy. And I'm a person who gets up. If I see a mother with her baby on the subway, you get up, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, because I'm on stage for an hour and 40 minutes without stopping, I'm never off stage and it's exhausting. I've had to figure out how, like, to up my calorie intake because it was just crazy the amount of weight I was losing in the beginning because I was always running. So when I get on the subway, I always look for a seat because I know I'm going to be on my feet nonstop. And there was a seat and I went to sit on it, but there was a Louis Vuitton backpack on it. So I said to the lady, I said, sitting next to it, I said, "Is that yours?" She said, "No." And so I said to the other woman, I said, "Is that yours?" And she said, "No." And there was a 6'3" guy with decked out in Louis Vuitton standing, staring at his backpack on the seat. And I said, "Would you mind, sir? Um, so I could sit down." And he said, "Nope." And I thought, this could go two ways. I can get mad and he could take a gun out and shoot me in the head or a knife or God knows what. Or I can say, which is what I did, I said, "Happy holidays. It's nice to see chivalry still exists." And I walked away.
Oh my God.
And then I didn't even get mad. I just went, I got sad, to be honest with
Yeah.
you, because
Yeah.
we need to look out for each other. And
Yeah.
what I love about living in New York is on the subway, especially, it's really where we need to look out for each other. And
Yeah. And mostly do, right? I mean,
yes,
mostly that turns into a hilarious, sweet connecting
yes,
story,
of course.
not
Yeah.
damn,
But
damn.
but we have choices, you know?
Mhm.
And because the world seems so volatile right now, make the smart. I always say to my son, who's almost 17, you know, I can't go out at night with him when he's going out with his boys, and God knows we live in New York City. And I just say to him, I go, "Honey, make smart choices because you always have choices."
Yeah, it's so true. Um, I also just want to just reflect back the idea of every night before you go out, 100 in. I get that, like, finally you can look at the script lovingly, not like hold on
Yeah.
to it and reread it quickly before you go on. But the idea that, like, you're tap dancing on a Broadway stage, it's not a musical, but you are getting to do that. And it's so much fun to watch. And I just love the idea for listeners who are still going to get to see it, just knowing that before every show, the vocal warm up is then followed by a tap dancing warm up. It's so great. And it's such a like, what a fantasy. Like when I grow up, I'm going to dance on Broadway. You are right
Oh my
now.
God, I
It's
know,
so
barely,
great.
barely.
I know, but it's really great. Also, this is a really important question my sister and I had. The black pants that you wear in the show. Are
So people have asked about those black pants.
do you know who makes them? Were they in your wardrobe? Did wardrobe get them for you, make them, or buy them?
So another beautiful story is that my wardrobe, our costume designer, been a dear friend of mine for 30 years. Oh, almost 30 years. Jeff Massey.
It's Rebecca Baldwin.
And he knows me so well. And he used to design for a company called Shaken.
Uh-huh.
Shaken. Oh, I loved their pants. And
Yes.
he would, if I needed something, I lived around the corner from the showroom. I used to just like I have a premiere tonight, and he would just throw something on me. So he knows me so well. And he wanted Delia to look like a little bit no, Audrey Hepburn, Breakfast at Tiffany's,
Exactly.
New York writer. Okay,
Yes.
the two.
Yes.
That's why he has me in that suit. It's Max Mara. The pants are Max Mara.
Okay.
And the
Well,
shirt, which people have stopped me on the autograph line when we leave, they're like, "Where'd you get that shirt?" He designs for Halston now. So that shirt is now on sale online. When we first started the play, it wasn't, and people were furious. But it's a great shirt, and it's Halston, and you can buy it online, and it's not crazy expensive.
you look everything about you, you are so beautiful in this play. It is really, as I said earlier, you are channeling. Yes, it's a big responsibility when you are playing a real life person who's at rehearsal and shows every week, who is a friend, but you have managed to take this character who is a real person, but so make her your own. This is a really full human being, and it doesn't feel like I'm going to do Delia Ephron. Like you're just playing this woman who is so relatable and beautiful and smart and funny and loving, and we root for you from the moment you come on stage and your love story. And it really is like just the balm, BALM, we all need for our soul right now. Before I let you go, is there a little known fact that you can share about yourself?
So I love that you do that. I was trying to think. The problem with when you've written a memoir is most people know it, but I do have one.
Okay, good.
Okay. I was living in Brooklyn with my boyfriend. This is all before ER. I had been a bartender, a coat check girl, a waitress, and I'd gotten a part in a Steven Seagal movie. So it was, I think it was like $2,000. So I had enough money to cover my rent for a couple months. Rent was cheap back then. And I just couldn't do it again. The idea of going back to a restaurant felt like I had failed as an actor, even though I was a member of the SAG union, you know. I am a knitter. I knit. And I decided one Christmas, when my money was running out and I had to pay my rent, which was $450 a month, I knit 100 gnomes. They're like finger puppet gnomes. They had beards. I crocheted in the beards, and they were Christmas ornaments. And I put them in a little box with tissue paper, and I hawked my wares up and down Madison Avenue. And a store bought all of them and handed me literally my rent, $450 in cash. And I was like, that's amazing. I mean, it took me a long time to make them all, and I came home with this empty little briefcase that I'd packed them in. And a month later, a woman from Pennsylvania who was an interior designer had seen them in the store window and bought them all the gnomes that I made. And they were featured. I don't remember the magazine, but she put only white lights and my gnomes all over her Christmas tree. And it was on the cover of an interior designer magazine.
That is a Christmas miracle.
Isn't
A
that crazy?
true, yes. As we enter Christmas 2024,
Yeah.
um, with those delightful gnomes dancing in our minds. Thank you for being on the podcast today. This was so much fun,
Thank
truly.
you so much. It was truly, truly a pleasure, really. And thank you for all your research and for coming to see the play.
Oh my God, it was great. All right, have a beautiful rest of your day, a beautiful rest of your run, and happy holidays and happy new year.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.